Lance Gunn's journey to becoming an All-American defensive back at the University of Texas is a wild one and included getting recruited by the Longhorns in 1987 after having only played a single game his senior year. In his final 2 seasons of high school, he had an unbelievable stat line that included 11 games, 8 interceptions, and 3 broken bones. In this sports flashback, Gunn talks about his recruitment, his arrival at the 40 acres, and what transpired over the next 5 seasons, including the magical 1990 season and the Shock the Nation tour, which included a massive nationally televised win over the Houston Cougars, quarterback David Klingler, and the run and shoot offense, where he recorded a pair of interceptions. Gunn also talks about the business side of college football and the challenges of losing the coach who recruited him in David McWilliams and playing for the new coach, John Mackovic. The three-time All-Southwest Conference and 1992 All-American also shares details of being drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals in the 1993 NFL Draft and how his rookie season unfortunately turned out to be a flashback to his injury-riddled senior year in high school, when after starting the first 8 games of the season, he suffered an injury and never returned to the field that year. Despite playing well, he never played a regular season NFL snap and opted to play in NFL Europe. And then in 1997, he gave up the game altogether when he made the incredible decision to give one of his kidneys to his ailing father. Gunn talks about all of this and what he's been doing in the last 30 years since leaving the 40 acres. And be sure to check out the end of the video where you can purchase a Lance Gunn timeline print that shows his stats and awards at UT and a timeline of his career. And now I'd like to welcome to the channel Lance Gunn. Hey, Lance, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely, sir. Always good to see you.
Good to see you too. So, before we get into this actual interview, I got to give some background and let folks know that I actually have a personal connection to you because your wife, Tracy,
Yeah.
lived in the same dorm down the hall from me our freshman year at UT many, many moons
Right.
ago, back in 1988.
Yeah.
So, I obviously followed your career through Tracy all
Yeah,
these years.
for
So
sure.
I
We're
just
both jester legends. You and I
That's
both.
well, you can have the legend part. I'll just be a Jester resident. So we'll just stick with that. So, but what I want to talk about, I just want to kind of go back and just relive your career. So let's just start back with the recruitment, Lance. Back in,
Yeah,
1987 when you were playing high school.
sure.
I remember you've told me this story before, but just kind of relive and revisit that time of you being
Yeah.
recruited by Texas and then coming to the University of Texas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks again, Kyle. So I graduated from North Shore High School, right? North Shore is nowhere near what it is now from a football powerhouse, right? I'd like to
Right.
think I started that to some degree. I probably didn't, but I go ahead and take a lot of credit for it.
Okay.
But I only played 2 years of high school. I played 86. That was my junior year, and played really, really well. We were 2-8, but I played really, really well. And so I started getting recruited kind of that next year and going into the spring and even summer of 87. But I only played one high school football game my senior year. So 11 games total between the 2 years. So you can imagine that fall of 87, it wasn't looking great, right? I'd gotten quite a bit of run, and back then there were no Twitter or anything like that. So you get
Right.
questionnaires that you'd fill out and send back to schools, et cetera. And it really had died down through that entire football season. And then I got pulled out of class in November of 87 and walk into my coach's office, and there is John Mize, offensive coordinator at the time, and David McWilliams. I recognized Coach McWilliams because he'd been on the cover of Texas football either that year or the year before, right? So I knew him right away when I walked in. And we just sit down and we're talking, and then, just kind of a little bit. And then Coach McWilliams and I go in a separate room, and we're just talking, and he's telling me, Coach McWilliams, he's a kickback, got a cigar that he chewed, but he never smoked in his mouth. And he's talking about, snacks and the meal plan and all the stuff going to you and practice, all the stuff like that. And he says, well, you know what, Lance? We'd like to offer you a scholarship. And like my head coach and Coach Mize both did like this because they were kind of in the other room and they kind of looked. And they're like, what? So they said, hey, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you, let your mom and dad know, and we'll call you in the morning around 6:30 to confirm, right? And again, so sure enough, the next day they called. We didn't have a cell phone. It was a landline, and I was on one line and my dad was on the other, and they made an official offer, right? So, you talk about just playing really well my junior year, but only 11 high school football games in which we went 2-9 in, and still be able to get a chance to come to UT was beyond belief. And I didn't realize, I took a visit later on that year, but I didn't go to my first UT football game until I believe the first game in 88, we played New Mexico State, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the first time I'd ever been in that stadium during an actual football game.
Okay.
And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. I said, all these people around here. And I don't know if I realized how big a deal it was until that day, right? And seeing all the folks there. And then obviously as that year went on and we played OU and Arkansas and A&M, and I think we even played BYU on it, right? So it was just realizing how big it was at the time. I had no idea how that was. And again, to come from that scenario, and I was the lowest rated recruit in our class, right? And we had Patton and Jeter and Willie Mack Garza, and it was a really, really solid class across the board. So truly fortunate to be, part of it. I ended up having as good a career as any of my classmates, right? So just, again, when I look back on it, I'm truly fortunate to get a chance to go play at UT.
So let's back up just a little bit, Lance, because you played your junior year and then you got hurt, right, for your senior year. That's why you didn't play your senior year.
Exactly, right. In the same game, I broke my ankle and I broke my wrist. I didn't say, one of the things, so again, 11 games, but I had an interception in 8 of the last games. So the last 7 in 86 and the only one I played in 87.
Okay.
So, that's pretty good, right? That's the ratio is strong.
Right.
But again, I ended up breaking, like I said, 2 bones in one game. And then at the end of my junior year, I had broken my collarbone. So
okay.
11 games, 3 broken bones, and 8 interceptions. That's the stat line right there.
That's 3 broken bones. That's a great stat line. Oh, shoot. All right. So you just mentioned the 88 season. So that was your freshman year. So it was a redshirt year. So you didn't get to play. So obviously, as you said, you kind of saw and understood the significance of playing at the University of Texas with the massive crowds, the big stadium. So let's skip ahead to 89, your first season where you are actually playing, and just kind of walk me through that first season, because I want to kind of talk about through the course of your career. That season, you guys went 5-6, didn't have the greatest of years, but talk to me individually. How do you feel your first season on the field actually went?
Yeah, no, great question. So again, our first game that year is against Colorado. No one knew it at the time, but Colorado was about to go on a 2-year run that would end in a national championship with the benefit of a 5th down, but still a title nonetheless, right?
Right.
So we roll in, and for me, it's like, okay, so that's September. That's actually Monday. It was Labor Day of 1989. And Kyle, I had played one real football game one time. Between that time and 86, I was nervous, isn't the word, right? I was scared to death, right? I played one football game in East Houston, versus I think Aldi and MacArthur, right, in 87, and that was it. Didn't play in 88, and played in 86, right? So, to walk into that deal on national TV, man, it was like, I was like, and it was a night game too. So just the build up and everything associated with it, right? So, but I think in that window, I picked up something just from a preparation standpoint, right? It was like, hey, I wanted to make sure I was ready. And for DB, the big thing is just to make sure, especially safety, that everybody's on the same page, right? Plays called, and if we make adjustment and like that, and that fell on me. And at the time, Stanley was playing cornerback, so it primarily fell on me. But he and I did a lot of that, right? That transition piece. So, but making sure. So I remember all day long, I had my little book up that I would draw up all the plays. I went through them just ever that I knew motion, and I like literally, and it worked, right? I actually ended up doing that the next 4 years. So before every game, I would literally go through and check and make sure I could make all the checks and knew all the calls and knew everything that was going on in that deal. but I can just remember being unbelievably nervous and I was the only one to do it. I couldn't tell anybody else that, hey, you guys know it's been 3 years since I really played any meaningful football.
Right.
And again, it wasn't anywhere near what we're about to go do. But played well. We lost that game again. Great team, but I played really well in that game. Hammer Eric Bieniemy on multiple occasions. I swore he was seeing me in his sleep later that night because we got after him pretty good, right? And learned to talk a little noise that day too, because Bieniemy liked to chatter and Hagan liked to talk a little bit, and so I love to engage in those conversations as well. So I carried on that tradition for the next 4 years, also of an ongoing conversation with my opponents as the game was going on, for sure.
So the Lance Gunn trash talking began in that freshman first game, the first game
you
against
can thank
Colorado.
Bieniemy and Hagan for
that. Oh, that's great, man. That is absolutely great. Okay, so that season, like I said, you finished 5-6. So there were some struggles in there. So just kind of let's go through, not through the season, but let's go to the end of the season, and look back on it, kind of what you learned from that first season on the 40 acres or first season of playing on the 40 acres and kind of what you took from that going into the second season in 1990.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, tough game there. Then I think we played SMU, and that was one of their first games coming back from probation. They were on probation 87, self-imposed probation, if I'm not mistaken, in 88. So 89 was when they actually got a chance to play at, I believe that's Omby Stadium there on campus. So that atmosphere was fantastic. Then we played Penn State, right? They were a really solid team. Had DJ Dozier on that team. I think he was the number 2 pick in the draft that next spring, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right.
And that's really when because I played pretty well in that game too, right? And it's really kind of separated. And at that point in time, by the time we played OU, I was the only DB that had started every single game because the injury or whatever, right? And became kind of, I remember, a couple guys just saying, hey, you're kind of like you're the veteran back there. Even though I'd only started 6 games or so. I was the only one that was kind of playing on a regular basis for any number of reasons, right, in that deal. So, and then the OU game was huge, right? We hadn't beaten them since 83, if I'm not mistaken, because the tie in 84 and in 85 through 88 were all losses. And again, just to go in there in that deal, and that was unbelievable, right? Again, another atmosphere that I'd never stepped foot in. I didn't travel or anything with the team the previous season. So again, I'm walking in that deal and I'm like, this is crazy. And didn't realize how when we were out before the game and then we came back out, so we're warming up and then we came out there, the introductions to the game started and the colors and just it was unbelievable, right? Just an amazing experience. Again, had I realized as big a deal as it was, I probably would have even been more nervous. But it was just kind of whatever, right? And so that was a huge win for us. Probably the biggest play. I think they muffed a punt or something like that. And Paget ended up picking it up and running in for a touchdown. And on that deal, I'm giving them the double horns as we're heading into the 20-yard line to score and everything like that. So just an amazing opportunity there. Kind of what ranked coming out of that game, I believe we beat Arkansas that year.
Yep.
And that may have either been before or after that, because that was the game I got kicked out in. There was an Arkansas guy, offensive lineman, that came down the field and chipped me a little bit. So I gave him a little bit back, and I ended up catching him in the helmet, and they threw your boy out. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me, right? So we ended up winning that game. And then obviously, but, later on in the year, I think we ended up losing to TCU, and it just didn't finish nearly as strong as we would have liked, for sure.
Right.
But I think coming out of that season, we felt like we were going to be pretty good the next year, even though we hadn't done much of anything at Texas in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I'm looking at the team that you had, the defense. You had Shane Dronette, Tommy Jeter, Mark Berry, Grady Cavness, Stanley Richard, and Van Malone. So a really good core group of defensive players. So, like we said, you finished 5-6 that first year, or your first year playing in '89.
Yeah.
So then we go to 1990 and the Shock the Nation tour season.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely blast for fans.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of talk about that season and going into it. Obviously, you just said you felt good going into it. So kind of give me a sense of
Yeah.
expectations going into that year?
Yeah, for sure. But I'd be remiss. Obviously, Boone Powell was a part of that group as well.
Right.
Anthony Curl, Oscar Giles, Bo Robinson. So we had it really from a too deep standpoint, right? We felt like
Right.
there was we had a pair of safety, just across the board. There was still a little bit of movement around, even at the going into that year, 1990, as far as but it ended up settling on me and Stanley being the safeties
Right.
to start that season, and we really just hit it off, right? We connected really, really well, right? We covered each other, right? Just it ended up playing. Now going back to '89. There was a play in that '89 game where I got beat, right? Just on a double move, I got beat. I'm literally about to tackle the guy to take the 15-yard interception, and Stanley comes out of nowhere. He has no business being on that side of the field. And we laugh about it all the time. I said, if he had not made that play, I probably would have been sitting the bench the rest of that year, right? So just, again, one of those deals that worked out. But going back to 1990, we roll into Penn State and get the win, right? It was a huge win. I think Gary Brown of Oilers fame popped off a kickoff return to start the game.
Yep.
And take it all the way back inside our 5. They ended up scoring, I think, on that third down, but they didn't do much on offense the rest of the day, right? We shut them down, right? Went into that deal. Probably the hardest thing about that trip is we ran short of gas or fuel on the way in, so they had to make an unplanned stop to fuel the plane so that we could make it into Happy Valley. Other than that, the trip was fantastic.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
So, exactly.
Wow, that's a crazy
Yeah,
story.
for sure, right? We get on the plane. I think we flew to Texas Tech later that year. We're like, hey, y'all got some fuel in this deal? We just going to Lubbock, but can y'all check it just to be sure?
Oh my God, that's wild. That is so wild.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that was just fantastic. Again, another big OU win there, right? And really, the defense kind of raised up and
let's talk about that OU game because
yeah.
I know the offense struggled throughout
Yeah.
most of the game, and you
Sure.
guys were trailing. I think it was 13-7 for most of the game, and then the last quarter, I think there was like 7 minutes left. Gardere gets the ball, drives down the field.
Yeah.
Texas scores. He gets a pass to Keith Cash.
Yeah.
In the end zone. Y'all take the lead, and then I remember this vividly because I was working for KTSB, the radio station, and I was on the field when R.D. Lasher kicks the field goal from 46 yards out. I'm under the upright, and it goes just outside of the upright, and you guys win.
Yeah.
So that is obviously, you've won the first time against OU, and we'll talk about it, your success against OU in a second, in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But that game, obviously it's a big game against OU, but you guys have really set the pace for what you're going to be doing the rest of the season. In that game, you come back, you had no business winning. Y'all, like you said, your offense struggled, but the defense kept you in the game.
For sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you go back and look at all 4 of them, OU was either ranked or had maybe one loss, but I think at least 3 to 4 years they were ranked and were playing really well.
Right.
And we take credit for all 4 wins. And the poor performance they had post that, we take credit for some of those losses as well, right? Did they? Because putting it into the season early in mid-October, right? In that deal, right? But yeah, for sure. Defense really stood up in that game and really kind of separated ourselves as far as what we could do and how we could do it. We had 2 offensive drives. I believe the front of the Dallas Morning News on Sunday said Cash 14, OU 13 was the title, right? So Keith and Kerry caught the 2 touchdowns, and we shoved on defense the entire day, right? Big goal line stands, couple of fumble recoveries, right? It was we knew about midway through the third quarter they couldn't score again, right? There was no we didn't think we were going to score twice. Sure. We thought we might have 1 touchdown in us, but we certainly didn't have 2. And probably didn't have 10 points in us. And Coach Fuller would say, this is what we really learned about position. Say, hey, give me 5 more, man. They're going to have the ball 5 more times. We're going to have it 4 or 5 more times. They're going to have it 4 or 5 more times. Give me 5 more. That's all I'm asking, right? You know what I'm saying? So it really kind of hit home. They're like, hey, let's give them 5 more. I think it ended up being 6 when it was all said and done, but we were able to shut them down on that last one. And again, he just barely missed that field goal. And then, it was just an unbelievable feeling to get 2 against them. And again, that was a good team. They were a very good team, right? You know what I'm saying? They were playing well going in that game and actually played pretty well even coming out of it for sure, right?
Okay, so let's skip forward.
That was the first year we'd beaten A&M in
Well,
some time too, right?
in
Yeah,
90.
yeah, 90.
Okay,
Right.
but
We hadn't beaten them.
we're not going to A&M yet, Lance. We're going to
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Houston.
Fair enough.
Houston, the Houston
Oh,
game. So that was a national
yeah,
televised game on ESPN. I remember being in the student section. I
yeah,
remember Houston came in much ballyhooed, run and shoot
yeah,
offense. The year before, Andre Ware had won the Heisman Trophy. This season, David Klingler was actually had better numbers than Ware
yeah,
coming into the game.
yeah,
And, everybody was thinking, oh, because you guys, the previous 2 seasons, I think they had really whipped you. Their offense was just
yeah,
dominant. And so
yeah.
coming into that game, everybody was excited about it. Talk to me about that specific game because it was a raucous crowd. I remember it vividly, and you guys got a big win there. So talk about that game.
For sure. I believe they had scored 60 points against us the previous 3 seasons. It was something ridiculous like that. My
Yeah.
my freshman year, it was 66-15. There may have been 60-40 in there, but
Yeah.
they had beaten us really, really well. I think I'd even read on the Chronicle and said, hey, I'm not saying we owed anybody anything, but they certainly beaten the dog out of us the last 3 years.
Right.
Undoubtedly, right?
Right.
Again, another night game that was as electric as I'd ever seen. Probably I would say, looking back on it now, that game and then Missouri 2008, it was either '08 or '09. I think it was '08 when they rolled in with Chase Daniel. That's the loudest I'd ever heard that stadium, right? And I've been to a few, as you have, before and since, and it was just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
And they were undefeated. They could not win they were on probation, as they seem to always be on probation, but that's another story altogether, right? But they were on probation, but they were playing well. I think they had fallen behind to A&M the week or two before and came back and beat them. And that was in November, maybe the first or second week in November. So the season was close to being over.
Right.
And they had not been stopped even a little bit. And again, I think we held them to 24 points, had several 3-and-outs, and they hadn't had more than 4 or 5 3-and-outs all year. And we strung several of them together in that game. And so it was just a couple of interceptions and really kind of, went from being somewhat known in the state of Texas to being known on a national, because everybody in, college football, was watching that game. It was a night game on ESPN when that was really starting to pop off. And so everybody was really kind of tuning into that deal to see what was going on. And probably as good a game as we played as a team in the time I was there, both kind of offensively and defensively. 45-24, I think, was the final, and the game really wasn't even that close. Fantastic game plan, just a solid deal for our program all the way around.
Well, you just mentioned 2 interceptions like casually. Those were your
Yeah.
2 interceptions, not
Yeah.
the team. The team, I think the team finished with 4.
4.
But
We
you
had 4.
2
Yeah.
of them. So, I mean,
Yeah.
when I look back, we just had a joke about your career interceptions. So you had 10, but you had 2 in one of the most pivotal games in Texas football history because it was such a big game and in your career. Yeah. So, I mean, that obviously had to feel good leaving that game knowing you really contributed not only just as a player, but getting 2 interceptions, which helps stymie the Houston Cougar defense or offense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Klinger, we felt like, hey, we probably cost him a Heisman there, potentially. For sure, really got after him. I grew up in Houston, as you know, and so that was big for me. Yeah, just, it said, just personally, was perceived differently as a football player after that game, undoubtedly, right? Through the rest of my career and, kind of what I was able to accomplish in total, it really kind of turned after that game and the way I was perceived and the ability I had, et cetera, undoubtedly.
Okay, so then you mentioned the A&M game. So go ahead and talk to me about that specific game that year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hadn't beaten them since maybe '83 as well, right?
Right.
I believe it was 6 in a row. they had the shirts and bumper stickers that would let you know that if you had forgotten. in classic Aggie fashion, right?
Of course.
So anyway, in that sense, right, we it was it was nip and tuck, right? So
All right.
they played well, they had great players, right? And so it was a lot of back and forth. And our offense, if you were to say in OU that our defense really kind of saved the day,
Yeah.
in that game, it was our offense that really stepped up and really, produced right. It was, I think, 28-27, but we kneeled the ball inside our 5-yard line the last 3 or 4 plays of the game. We would have scored another touchdown on them easy in that deal. So certainly their offense really carried us. That was one of Peter's better games, couple big touchdown runs, some big plays by Keith and Carey, Stephen Clark, right? Just the whole crew, Johnny Walker, right? So they played unbelievably well. Bucky gave us fits all day long. That was an 11 a.m. game. I think it was the only one we played in the whole time I was there on CBS, and he gave us fits all day long. But we got the win, right? If you look at in the 80s, it had been, I think, golly, it had been 6 years since we beat them. And over that time frame, I think we went 1-9 or 1-8 against them because they won the next 2 or 3 after that for sure. Right. So in that window, right, that was a huge win for us, undoubtedly.
Okay, so we have to talk about the painful moment. I mean, you guys are rewarded. You win the Southwest Conference title. Yeah. There's no tournaments or no championship games back then. So the reward is playing Miami in the Cotton Bowl. I remember it well because it was so cold. It was freezing. I think it was in the 20s, maybe low 30s. And so it was not the best of efforts or best game, I guess. I mean, the effort was there, but the results were not. So this kind of relive that painful memory of playing the Hurricanes in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think our preparation in hindsight wasn't great for that week. Some of that was caused by the weather, but it's cold on both sides of the field. Right. So I mean, that's no excuse. They had, if you look back on that team, they had a bunch of first rounders.
Yep.
Hell, I think even The Rock played on that team and he couldn't even get on the field. Dwayne Johnson was riding the bench for the Canes in that deal, right? So, but they outplayed us. It was close for a while. And when I tell people that, it's kind of say, yeah, but it was close, right? We had a dropped interception. We couldn't score kind of right before halftime, right? So I think it was 19-6, and we had a chance to kind of make that a little bit more. And then all of a sudden it started to snowball after that, right? They got after us, right? We didn't have any answers for their speed and athleticism in the long run, for sure, right? So probably one of the hardest parts about that deal is certainly we felt like had we won that game, we would have gotten serious national championship consideration. Yeah. Because I think it was split that year by Colorado and Georgia Tech, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, and so in that sense, it was, I think they would have given us the nod and we would have gotten at least one of those, especially with the 5th down, et cetera, in that deal. So that was disappointing. And then the other thing is the next year going into camp, the NCAA instituted all these rules and regulations around trash talking, et cetera. And the videos they showed were pretty much from our game versus Miami and all the trash talking and talking they did against us. So not only do we have to see that, but everybody else in the country got a chance to watch that same video that was produced by the NCAA. So for sure, it was best season we had there, undoubtedly during the time I was there, but it was extremely disappointing. And there is a saying, you have 60 minutes to play, but a lifetime to remember. And they are telling the truth, right? Because that one goes down hard even today.
Sure. Yeah. Wasn't Irvin in that game?
He wasn't. No, I'm trying to think. I played with a guy, Darrell Williams. He was a safety there. I think it was I'm not sure if that was Walsh that was quarterback. If I'm not mistaken, it may have been. Yeah. I know they had, I forget a couple of the receivers they had, right? But I think they had probably 8 or 9 guys. Russell Maryland. Yeah. I've run into Big Russ a couple of times in Austin since. And that's the first team he wants to talk to me about.
Of course.
It's remember that when we put it on. I said, yes, sir, I do remember that. So yeah, no, they had several guys that ended up getting drafted off that team. So they were good. They won the national championship with Washington, split it with Washington the next year. So they were loaded. They had a lot of good players.
All right, so let's skip forward to that next year. So 1991 for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of that 1990 season was you captured, magic in a bottle or
Mm-hmm.
lightning in a bottle. And it was just a magical moment for the team.
Yeah.
You guys went 5-6 in 89. I think it was 10-2.
10-2.
Yeah, 10
Yeah.
and 2 in 1990. And then
Yeah.
1991, you kind of revert back to the previous season. So it's another 5-6 season.
Yeah.
For Coach McWilliams, which turned out to be his last season. So
Yeah.
just kind of summarize that season and then kind of what happened at the end with Coach Mack.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was one started out with a lot of high expectations, even despite losing in the Cotton Bowl the year before. So I think we started top 10 or maybe just outside the top 10.
Right.
What we found early on is, man, we just struggled offensively, right? Just to put points on the board was a struggle. So we played in a ton of close games. We played in a ton of games that could have gone either way, right? It just, but we literally just struggled offensively, struggled even in our kicking game from a field goal perspective, right? It just being honest, that was the biggest struggle. It's the flip side of that is to this day, all considered, I still think that's one of the best defenses in school history. I would put it up there. You go 77, you go 83. I really like what they did last year, right? I think that group's really, really solid. When you go back and look, especially the way the game has changed, I thought it was phenomenal. Matter of fact, I put that, but I think we're in that conversation. I'd put all those, including last year, ahead of us. But you talk about top 5 or 6 defenses that have ever rolled out in the university in a school that's known for putting out some pretty good defenses.
Yeah.
That 91 squad could match any, right? I think we finished 3rd in the country that year defensively, and kind of stats. We had we were back-to-back the best pass defense in the country. We were the best in 90, we were the best in 91, and it wasn't close the second. 3rd overall defense, number 1 was Washington, who won the national title that year, and A&M was number 2. We had 100+ more snaps on defense than both of those teams. So we played essentially a game and a half more on defense than either one of those teams did. Wow. So it was stark how large the gap was for sure, right? And so a lot of respect for those guys. Again, a lot of those guys, I think there was 7 or 8 of us off that team, that defense alone, that ended up getting drafted. So it was tough to take, but we built a camaraderie and unity in that deal that we still talk about to this day for sure.
Right.
But the season was a bit of a wash. We had some high points. OU again for time number 3, and they were full on better than we were, right? I think that was a 10-7 game, and Bubba Jacks in the house for the scoop and score. And they changed the rules. The year before, you couldn't pick up a fumble and return it.
That's right.
And that was the first year that they had changed those rules. And even that, the fumble had to be on the plus side of the ball. You couldn't return it if it was in the backfield. So it was barely on the other side of the line of scrimmage, right? So, and that was it, right? We weren't going to score much of a matter of fact, we didn't know if we were going to score at all, right? Because their defense, they had some players on that team as well, and their defense was really, really good. I thought that was the game that really hurt them the most because they fell apart the rest of the year, and they were really, really good going into that deal for sure.
Okay, so I just want to back up real quick.
Yeah.
1990, you were all Southwest Conference.
Yeah.
1991, this season we're talking about, you were also all Southwest Conference. So you're obviously getting recognized for your efforts. Yeah. Then at the end of that season, Coach McWilliams gets let go. So kind of talk to me about, this is the guy that came to you and talked to you at North Shore and brought you to the University of Texas.
Yeah.
And what that felt like for you as a player, losing your coach that had brought you and recruited you.
Probably the thing that stuck out on that deal is I was just totally naive to that even being a thing, right? I didn't even realize that there was buzz or there was talk that, hey, if this deal goes sideways and we don't make another bowl game, we have another losing record, right?
Right.
Looking back on it now, it's like, oh, I get it, right? I understand it. I didn't like it, but I
Sure.
got it and understood it. But I was surprised, right? And I was there, right? But I didn't realize, again, UT football is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
if you need another reminder, right? It doesn't matter what you did the year before. It doesn't matter you're trying to get the deal turned around and all this stuff like that. That's great, but we got to win games here, right? That's just the way that deal works. And that was year, I believe, 5, and it to your point, we'd maybe taken a little bit of a step back, and there was no room to go backwards, right? It was only needed to be forward from there. So I think the 2 or really 3 seasons, because 88 wasn't great,
Right.
89 wasn't great, and 91 wasn't great, right? And that goes down tough, but that's just the way that is, right? Undoubtedly, right? So I was just remember being surprised when he was fired. And I ended up calling him that night and saying, hey, coach, love you. That was us. It wasn't you. And he was appreciative of it, right? For sure, right? But it was certainly another realization. I mean, it's a big time deal, right? And there's a certain level of expectation to sit to it. But I did not see the termination coming at all.
Okay. So then Makovic gets hired.
Yeah.
Tell me about like your thoughts when he gets hired, maybe the first conversation you had with him and what that was like. Obviously, losing the guy that you're connected to,
Yeah.
and, playing for someone who you don't really know who they are and what they're about, and they have to come in and kind of bring in their whole system. So obviously, he was an offensive-minded coach. So
Yeah.
kind of just tell me what your thoughts were when he came in.
It was the first time, and I didn't really put this into words until many years later,
Mhm.
but you can appreciate this being a sports fan as much as I am, that when a coach gets fired, the guy they bring in is usually the complete opposite of the guy that was there, right? And so
Yep.
that's the best way to describe it. Coach McGee is more of a defensive guy, really connected to Texas, really a player's coach, just really in that. And you can be successful in that window. So we're not talking about the inability to be successful. There's all types of coaches that can have a level of success
Right.
and approach the process differently in that deal. But Makovic was, he was suit and tie, and he was Northeast. He was offense,
Yep.
and he was, it was his way, or you could get the stepping. You know what I'm saying, right? And that
Right.
deal, right? And ultimately, we needed some of that for sure, right? I think he helped usher in too. I think in hindsight, part of his contract was an improvement to facilities and a lot of the stuff that kind of went in and was taken out of the track and all. So he kind of helped jumpstart a lot of that and
Okay.
kind of helped push Texas into, hey, if we're going to be a big time program like we always have been in the past, then some of these things got to change around here. So in that respect, he was good for the university. He could be difficult to get along with, right? He had a little edge to him, right? He had been successful in his career in a couple of different stops, undoubtedly, right? Was extremely intelligent, but sometimes he rubbed some folks the wrong way. So, but he won the last Southwest Conference championship, and he won the first Big 12 championship, and we needed both of those. We had not had a significant amount of success in the '90s up until that point, for
Right.
sure, right? Unfortunately, the minute he had a bad season, they rolled him out of there pretty quick, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of what you get when that deal. When you rub people the wrong way, the first chance they get to get rid of you, they take full advantage of it, right? And that's
Sure.
from my memory, that's what I see. But he and I always had a good relationship. I think he and I knew hey, I had one more year, and it was really more like 6 months, right? I mean, and this deal was gonna go and pretty fast. So I respected him, and he showed me a great deal of respect as well. And kind of took it at that, right? I wasn't one of his guys, and he was trying to build something that was going to last long after I was gone, right? And he was in it for long, but he treated me with respect, and I attempted to do that same with him, right? So our relationship during that time frame couldn't be described as anything but good. He had a job to do. We finished 6-5. So again, I had 3 seasons of losing records and 1 season or 2 seasons of winning records, right? And
Right.
he did a really good job. There's no doubt, right? He helped move the program and forced it to be better and different than it had been in the past. So in that respect, is one of the more important coaches in the history of the university, to be honest, right? Kind of holds a unique spot to kind of transition from kind of good old boy Southwest Conference to, hey, you know what, we're going to change this deal big time, right? And really kind of set this deal on fire moving forward.
So that season, like you said, y'all finished 6-5. But what was notable to me in my notes is the A&M game. You had a career high 16 tackles.
Yeah.
So that was also the season that you got first team All America honors. So just talk to me about that game and then just your season as a whole, because obviously that game you had 16 tackles, but you were recognized as an All American. So clearly you had a successful season, even though the team just was moderately successful at 6-5.
Yeah, no, for sure, right. Obviously, didn't have nearly as many interceptions that it had the previous 2 years.
Right.
I think teams really looked to run the football against us as much as they could, kind of based on our makeup and where we maybe had struggled a little bit, right, for sure. And I think that was, I had a really solid career. So that was a nod to that as well, right? Undoubtedly, right? I put up that, but I did put up some pretty good numbers in that deal. You don't want your safety making a ton of tackles,
No, no.
but in that respect, but I did make a few tackles in that deal because it was somewhat necessary, right, in that piece, right? But undoubtedly, still played well across the board in that deal. I kind of battled injuries the last 2 years there, right? But was still. If you talk about just a career perspective, dude, I could not have asked for any more. Someone would have told me in 1987 or 86, this is what the next 10 years would look like from a football perspective, I would have taken it in a heartbeat.
Sure.
And so truly fortunate to be there and culminated, right? Considered one of the better players to have ever played at the university in a program that is, one of the 5 or 6 best programs in the history of college football.
Yeah.
I'm humbled by that honor for sure, no doubt.
So you finish that season, you get the All-American honors, and then we're thinking next season you're playing in the NFL. So kind of give me a sense of what goes into that process, contact that you might have had with teams. I'm trying to think back what it was like back then compared to what it is like now, but just kind of give me a sense of what it was like knowing, all right, you finished your time on the 40 acres. Now it's time to take that next step, and what was the plan and the process over the next few months?
Yeah, no, for sure. So probably learned a few things in that deal along the way. So certainly football, NFL is even more of a business for sure, right? So you want to talk about going through the ringer of the Senior Bowl, where our coaches were Nick Saban and Bill Belichick.
Wow.
So the Cleveland, right, for sure, right? So
pretty good
see
company.
the intensity, particularly with Saban, because he was defensive coordinator and defensive back coach, right? So certainly the intensity you see is legit, right? He had it even 30 some odd years ago.
Right.
And then, going through the combine and that just meat grinder. And remember, they had a concern about my neck. So then everything stopped and they shipped me to the hospital and they did a series of x-rays there and MRIs to see, hey, is everything okay, right? You know what I'm saying? And I told you I'd broken my wrist in high school and they wanted to get another look at that. And this is something that had happened 5 or 6 years before and I'd never had any problem with it. But the thoroughness by which they go through your athletic background, your academic background, who you know, everything like that was amazing, right? And again, intuitively kind of makes sense, but didn't realize to the extent that played out. So was drafted later than I would have liked to have been.
Sure.
But then started out really well in Cincy, right? 93 started until I ended up, hurting a knee there, right? And it just kind of the career took a little bit of a side. But from a 7th rounder to start, so I played in 8 or 9 games. So my career stat line, I think it's 8 starts, 8 games, tackles, fumble recovery, et cetera, and then that's it, right?
Yeah.
It ends as fast as it started, right? I don't know if I'm the only person that got an 8-game career but started all 8 of those games, right? It's extremely hard to do, So, but anyway, so again, thankful for that whole process. Would have liked it to have been more. Yeah, absolutely. Right. But just even getting to be a part of it in the brief window I was was just amazing. I remember in '88 when we got there, before the upperclassmen got there, and they asked, "Hey, how many of you? I think it was 20 of us want to play in the NFL, right?" And everybody, or half of us, raised our hand. I didn't think about it. I was like, it wasn't even a thought, you know, to go play. But I remember guys in the room saying, "Yeah, no." And again, another thing that clicks. So I guess if you're gonna play in the NFL, you probably start in this room, right? It
Yeah.
probably starts here and
Yeah.
then moves on from there, right? And so again, in total, I've shared this a lot. There were a lot of things that I didn't really realize how big they were or how important they were in the grand scheme in that kind of life and
Mhm.
arena of football and college football and all that stuff like that, that along the way kind of picked up. And looking back on it, I'm like, oh, wow, right? That was more important than I thought or bigger than I realized at the time.
So I have to mention, because we've talked about
Yeah.
this in the past, there was one particular quarterback on the Cincinnati roster that you had a connection
Yeah.
with.
And your boy got him 3 times too, right?
Yeah.
Two in 90 and one in 91, right? So when we got there, for sure, he was Klinger was our starting QB, right? And he liked to talk a little bit, you know. And I'd say, hey, you know, you gonna throw me another one again, baby? You know, I got 3. I may pick up another one after this practice. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I kept a running count for him the whole time we was
Oh, so okay,
there.
so you played with them at that 8 games,
Yeah,
and then the following season you come back to camp with the
yeah,
Bengals, and then they release you.
yeah,
So then in that period you didn't really play, right? Because in the
yeah,
following
yeah. No,
season,
absolutely. That would have been '94.
right?
And golly, I played really well. I mean, it was just preseason, but I felt like I missed that back half of that season, and I was, Kyle, I was playing as good a football as I'd ever played in my life,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I'd had 3 interceptions during that preseason, and just really was playing well. Just being out. Right? I know it's just preseason, but I was out there with starters, right? I was out there with guys that were going to be playing on Sunday, right? And
Right.
um, they brought in a guy named Lewis Oliver from Miami to essentially take my spot, and but he was hurt kind of at the start of camp, and so I got the reps. You know,
Mhm.
I had been a starter last year before I got hurt, and I got the reps. So I was out there playing meaningful football against guys that were going to be starting. So it wasn't, some late fourth quarter stuff. It was live ammunition versus, players that so played as well. But, again, realized, hey, you know what, that the decision had been made, money had been spent, and that was the direction they were going to go, right? And so I even talked to said we knew. I was like, I'm trying to play to hopefully someone else will see me, right? Someone else will want to pick me up. And then, man, I went on the what they call the tour, right? Man, I went to the Jets. I went to, man, I thought the Giants. Man, I thought that one was close, right? I worked out really well for them, and they just decided to go in that direction. I went to New England. It was Bill Parcells when he was at New England. We were there. We worked out right. So what they do is they call guys in on. Usually, you'd fly in Monday night. Tuesday was an off day for everybody in the NFL, and if somebody had gotten hurt or somebody had gotten cut coming out of Monday, you go. So I've literally flew all over the league, and it just didn't happen. Right? It was had some good workouts, had some good conversations, and it just wasn't able to ring that bell. Right? And so that was tough. Probably as hard a time because you got to stay in shape
Mhm.
and you got to do a lot of this stuff on your own. You got no system in place, so you got to get up and lift and run, and you know try to you don't want to spend too much money, so try to little part-time job. You're just it's an interesting time for sure to try to get back into that deal, right? Don't get me wrong. Lance Gunn doesn't need a sob story. I'm good, right? I really am, but it was like, hey, the other side of that, you're just there. Probably the hardest part of that immediate 2-3 years is I would watch games on Sunday and saw guys that I had played with and played against,
Yeah.
and in some respects I thought was better than. But I'm sitting here on this couch and they're out there on that field, so you know there's a difference between us for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
So then the 95 season, you go to camp
yeah,
with the Saints. So
yeah.
again, another opportunity you feel like, and kind of talk me through that camp.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At that point in time, I hadn't played any meaningful football in a while, right? So going 2 years and not being in and
Right.
not being connected to any workout routine and like that, that's tough, right? When you go that long or that extended time without being connected and without playing, and not having weight room access, all that stuff like that, that you're trying to build on your own, but it's just not the same, right? In that
Sure.
deal. So that was tough for sure, right? But didn't play great in New Orleans, if I'm being honest with myself, right? And I know and we talked to my agent coming out and say, you need to go somewhere and actually play, right? You hadn't played much over the last 2 years at that point in time.
Right.
And so that kind of led to 96 going and playing in Europe for that NFL World League. And it was, you had to have played in the NFL previously, was one of the requirements that they wanted to be a part of that league.
Okay.
Many of the players in NFL Europe were actually on teams, and others were like myself that were trying to get back on teams.
Sure.
And so that sense it worked as a little bit of a farm system for the 4 or 5 years that it existed in that regard. And so again, got a chance to go over there, and that was a fantastic experience. Um, but knew, hey, coming out of that deal, no chance to go to NFL, and I had some opportunities to go play in Canada, but that would have been a 2 or 3 year commitment, and I decided, hey, it might be better for me to go do something else. I can remember this great story. I can remember I had started working for Frito Lay after the summer of '96. I played in Europe, and I was, everybody starts on a route at Frito Lay, so I was running a route in Belton, Texas. I get a page, again, sign of the times. I get a page from my agent, and I call him back on a payphone, again, another sign of the times. And he
Yeah.
says, hey, I got a deal for you in Canada. A couple of teams are interested. Would you like, to take advantage of, go to their camp and et cetera. And I remember, telling him no, right? In the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, saying, "Hey, I think I'm done," right? And I hung up the phone. I was like, "Oof." That's just to realize that after playing since I was 5 years old, to realize, hey, at that point in time, it's time to go do something else. It's always tough, but it worked out really well, and would not have traded the experiences for anything, for sure.
So just real quick, going
Yeah,
back to Europe, kind of just tell me like what the environment was like, the fans. I mean, because obviously this now the NFL goes over to
yeah,
Europe and all these places on a
yeah,
regular basis, but back
yeah,
then there weren't NFL games being played over there.
yeah,
So it was really a novelty, a new thing. So kind of just
yeah.
give me a sense of the environment playing in those European stadiums. Were they actually, I got to ask, were they football specific or soccer specific?
They were soccer specific.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. It was unbelievable. We played in Frankfurt, Germany, and they had the best fans, right? So when I say Kyle, it was, if we played a game at 7 o'clock at night, from about 12 noon on, it was a full blown party. They had circus tents and live wire acts and car shows, and everything was built around the game that was going to be played tonight. There were fires in the stands. You know what I'm saying? I'm telling you right now, dude, it was wild. And we had had some success previously, right? And it was one of the better teams in the history of NFL Europe. And it lived up to the billing, right? So, best fans, unbelievable atmosphere. I got a chance to play in two Olympic stadiums. So most of the places we played were soccer fields. We played in Barcelona, where they had held the '92 Olympics.
Right.
We played in Amsterdam, where they'd held the 1928 Olympics. We played in a bunch of other soccer complexes along the way, but it was absolutely unbelievable. Just a phenomenal experience to see, and the fans were fantastic. Actually had a decent team. Steve Pelluer was our quarterback to start that deal. Ernie Stotner, again of Cowboys fame,
Yep.
a legendary defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, right, was our head coach. Played against the Fridge, right? So it was unbelievable. I got a chance to travel around Europe and play football and get paid to do so. So it was a lot of fun.
Okay, so then you just talked about kind of talking with your agent about it's
Yeah,
time to step away and
sure.
move on. But then there's a moment in your life with your family and your
Yeah,
dad.
Yeah.
that really kind of, solidified, I'm done with football. So kind of
Yeah.
talk to me about that story because I mean, just thinking about it, it's such a moving story. It's a
Yeah.
human interest story. So just kind of talk to me about that specific event.
Yeah. No, for sure. And really, those two happen in close proximity to each other, right? My dad ended up calling me and he was going into renal failure, right? And so he needed a kidney. And so I went through a series of tests to see if there was a match. And, it was expected it was a perfect match in that deal, right? And it just, in hindsight, just it was time. And that was the solidified to your point to say, what, this works out for a reason. There's I would love to continue to play football, but there's some things that work out that are bigger than that. And so we actually ended up doing the surgery in spring of the next year. So there's a series of tests you go through, and then they want you to talk to a psychiatrist and walk through and make sure you're physically and mentally okay with everything. So there was an entire process, about 6 months of a process to when, hey, is this going to be a match or physically, man, all that stuff like that they had us both go through before we rolled in there to do that, right? But it was truly amazing. They laughed because he would say, hey, he felt better immediately after. I was the one that was in bad shape for about a week, right? It's like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? Your body's like, hey, what's going on?
Sure.
But it ended up, but it ended up being fantastic, right? To be able to improve the quality of life for someone who gave you life is truly a unique experience and truly blessed to be able to do that as well. So
So
thank you
what,
for bringing that up for sure.
absolutely. So what year was that, Lance?
That was 1997 when
Okay.
we did the surgery. So I finished up in Europe in 96, in
Okay.
September of 96, started working for Frito-Lay, or August of 96, finished up in September, or started working for Frito-Lay in September of 96. And then, yeah, we ended up doing that surgery in probably May or June of 97. Yeah.
Okay. So we didn't get you.
Right after Tracy and I got married on May 3rd, and I did it a month after that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. So
Yeah.
we didn't talk about you got your degree from UT in marketing in 1993, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then obviously you and Tracy get married, you give your kidney to your father, you donate the kidney. And so then kind of let's just talk about, I know you personally, so I know the
Yeah.
events of your life, but just kind of talk about you and Tracy got married, y'all have two beautiful kids, and just kind of tell me, let's just kind of catch up with what's been going on with Lance Gunn since 1997. What's been going on in your
Yeah.
life?
No, absolutely. So I started working. Tracy and I got married in 97, started working for Frito-Lay at the end of 96. Our daughter Tegan was born in 2001,
Mhm.
and our son Tynan was born in 2003. As you know, we've lived a lot of different places
Yeah.
along the way, right? So we've lived in Houston and Austin and Cedar Park to be exact, and then South Austin, and then I left Frito-Lay and went to work for Pulte Homes. So then I went out to Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area, then moved back still with Pulte. So just the career that is in from a football standpoint, Frito-Lay, home builder, Pulte, to back to Frito-Lay. And I've been at Frito since 2011.
Mhm.
So I've got 23 years, I think, in total over two different stints, or coming up on 23 years over two different stints. Um, I picked up an MBA from A&M along the way, oddly enough.
Traitor, traitor.
Well, you'll love this. I'm currently working on my PhD from Abilene Christian, so
There you go.
glutton for punishment for sure in that deal. But anyway, yeah, no. So but I've again spent most of my working career with Frito-Lay, obviously part of PepsiCo, and that's been fantastic. So I'm kind of sales director here in the Central Texas, Austin, greater Central Texas area, and have been full time since 2011, right? And so just truly blessed to be a part of that organization. Got a great team, and obviously work for a great company.
So 2011, you started working for Frito-Lay, but there's also a significant milestone in 2011
Yeah.
related to UT, and you got
Yes.
inducted into the Hall of Honor. So, I mean, I know how big of a deal that was. So just kind of talk to me about,
Yeah. Yeah.
something
So
that
Coach McWilliams is the
recognizes.
one. Yeah, he's the one that called me, right? And they do the voting probably around this time, give or take. They had a vote to NHC, and he had mentioned to me in years past that, hey, your name's come up, and these things take time. You have to have left the university 10 years. So I left in 93,
Mhm.
and so wasn't eligible as a player until 2003.
Right.
And you had to have been out 10 years. And yeah, but he had mentioned to me in passing a couple times, hey, your name's come up, you'll get in, don't worry about it. And I was like, all right, I didn't even think much of it. But when he called me, I was excited, right? Undoubtedly, right? Just to kind of sit back. I remember handing the phone and thinking, wow. And then I went to the website and I looked at all the guys who were in there. It's a who's who
Sure.
of athletes from the state of Texas. If you talk about an athlete that did anything that's from Texas, this state, they're probably in there, right? And it's a wow, right? Across multiple sports
Sure.
on the men and women's side. So when you look at it, it's like, you got Crenshaw, Kite, Campbell, the Clemens, I'm not saying I'm better than any of those guys.
No.
Nowhere close to it, but we're all in the hall.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, right? And so again, another like, wow, again, truly humbled in that deal, to be able to be a part of that. And amongst that group that we had, my class, I was the first. There's only two of us that are in, and I was the first one that was in, right? So again, a huge honor in that respect, and gave them that respect that night too. They kind of talked through and say, "I was class of '88, right?" I was proud to be able to represent those guys there for sure.
So when you look back on your life, Lance, as we've gotten older and specifically your career, I mean, we talked
Yeah,
about the very beginning. You're this kid from North Shore that's got hurt. You don't even play any games. You're
yeah,
not even, you don't even play your senior year. But then now you look back and you're in the Hall of Honor. I mean, it's like such a wild jump from this little no-name kid that,
yeah,
hadn't had a lot of success because you had been hurt. You had success prior before you got hurt, but then you didn't get to show it. Then you're in the Hall of Honor at one of the most prestigious universities and football programs. I mean, it has to almost be surreal to
yeah.
look back and go, how you accomplished so many things, and you're regarded as one of the best defensive backs in UT football history.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Certainly, you work hard, try to put yourself in a good position, but you can't say you plan anything like that, right? For sure. So definitely had a lot of folks the support along the way. And then certainly when you get opportunities, I took advantage of a few along the way,
Sure.
right? That, you got a nod here or there, or there was something that came up, and it happened, and you were put in a spot that maybe you didn't think you were going to be put in, nor did anybody else. But man, when you got there, you were ready, and you made something happen. And then after that, it was, oh yeah, that was always going to happen. Like, well, no, but we're certainly ready when it did, right? And so there's something to be said for that, and that's probably been one of the things that I've benefited from across life. That I feel like I'm ready, so that when something does come up, can in position to be able to take advantage. You get a lot of breaks, but if you're not able to take advantage of them
Right.
when they come through, then they go by as unseen opportunities for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, having known you for all these years since '88,
Yeah.
you've been a great friend. I love your family. It's
Yeah.
been an awesome experience just to kind of see you get recognized back in 2011 and just know, all the things that you accomplished. And what's really cool is I was there. I saw all these
Yeah.
things happen. So I have a
Yeah.
personal connection, not only to you, but to the
Yeah.
games themselves. So I really appreciate you taking the time to kind
Yeah.
of revisit those awesome memories from back in the '80s into the '90s. I wish you the best of luck, and please send my love to Tracy and the family. Okay.
Awesome. We love you guys as well. Appreciate this opportunity. You've always been good to us. So, and think the world of you as well. So thank you as well. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Good talking to you, buddy. Take care.